Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we had basically in our last class, so as I told you that the first chapter that we are doing in this quantum mechanics syllabus, the quantum mechanics syllabus of this semester is we are going to delve into the wave characteristics of matter in a bit detail. Okay, so you had already done this as a topic in your quantum theory class in your previous semester, but it was only a qualitative discussion. Okay, so now we will really look into the statistical point of view of the thing, and we'll also see mathematically what is really the nature of the wave that represents matter when we say when we talk about dual character of matter and wave. Okay, so in the last class we had discussed things that are already known to you. Okay, so some historical facts like why quantum mechanics came into being, and then we saw that pre 1900 electromagnetic wave nature of light was doing fine, whereas in experiments done post 1900 things were observed that could not be explained using the electromagnetic wave nature. So things like black body radiation and Compton effect and photoelectric effect. And so for these, for explaining the observations of these phenomena, uh, Planck first introduced quantization and then Einstein introduced photon about 5 years later. And so the concept of light as a particle came, and it was finally established that light is dual in nature. Okay. Now, since nature is a very symmetric um, the universe itself has a natural symmetry, and universe consists of energy and matter. So if energy is dual in nature, then matter must also have dual nature. Okay, so the quest for this wave nature of matter began. Okay, and I told you the story of how Prince Louis de Broglie, who was actually studying medicine, he came visiting his brother and he saw his papers on establishing the the wave nature of particles, and how he did some study himself, self study, mind you, and he said that he gave this hypothesis that all moving objects have associated with them a wave, the wavelength of which is given by lambda equal to h by p. Okay, so this was a hypothesis which was about 3 years later verified in Davison Germa's experiment, where observation of diffraction like intensity pattern uh, was made, and so it was believed that the electrons were behaving not as particles but as waves, so that the intensity pattern showed diffraction like characteristics. And then Laue pattern was observed for neutron diffraction. Laue pattern is actually observed for X-rays, which are waves. When when scattered neutron showed the same pattern, it was deciphered that these neutrons, small particles moving fast, they are also behaving like waves. And Laue pattern was later on also observed for hydrogen and helium atom diffraction. And so wave nature of matter was established, and it was thus comprehended that matter also had dual character. Okay. Now we know that the wave that we associate with the equation that we associate with the progressive wave is of the form, or it has the profile a sine kx minus omega t. Okay, so let us suppose that the wave associated with a moving particle, if the wave is at all associated, which the experiments have shown that yes, waves are associated with moving particles. So now we have to try to understand what the nature of this wave is. How does it behave under different circumstances? Okay, why we can't see the wave at all. So suppose that the profile of the wave associated with the particle is like this: a sine 2 pi x by lambda minus nu t. So this is analogous to the expression of electric field, um, which is expressed in this manner. All of you, if you remembered your physical optics classes, then you must remember that we use this expression of electric field in all places where we had to represent light in a mathematical manner. Okay, and we know that mod E square gives us the intensity of radiation when light is treated as a wave, and mod E square is proportional to h nu n, n being the average number of photons when light is behaving as a stream of particles. So in analogy to that, we can say that mod chi square must have a similar role to play in case of matter waves. So it was here that Born interpretation came into being. Okay. So what does Born interpretation say? It basically gives us the probability of finding a particle within a given interval in space at a given time. Okay. Born interpretation gives the probability of finding a particle within a given interval in space at a particular instant of time. And I had written down Born interpretation in some detail, and I had also explained this, saying that if the value of the probability is 0 or very small at some point, it means that chances of finding the particle at that particular point in space and time is very rare. Whereas if the value is pretty large, then that means that chances of locating the particle at that point in time in space and time is pretty high. Okay? So the entire definition and concept now switches over from deterministic to probabilistic. Okay, so you can see gradually that we are sort of switching our language. Okay, so this is how the amplitude of the wave function that we are associating with a moving particle is interpreted by Born. Now let us see how the quest of matter wave is how does it move forward. For this we have to, this also I had discussed, principle of complementarity, which says that wave and particle models must be complementary to each other. Okay, there must not be any there is, what should I say, there is no competition between the two. They just complement each other, the two models. Okay, so the relation of radiation and matter is such that we cannot specifically say that radiation is wave or matter is particle. They are not just simply waves or simply particles. All right. There is the requirement of a more general model, and this general model should, so the thing is like this, that you cannot have one model which will exclusively describe radiation and another model which will exclusively describe matter. Okay, but that was the case up till now. Classical mechanics and everything related to classical mechanics was exclusive for particles, movement of particles, right? You have been doing classical mechanics from, I think, class 7 or 6 in school, from the time physical science has been introduced in school. And you have never thought about a particle or a body as anything other than that. And you have been using Newtonian mechanics throughout, and there was no problem in it. But you could not possibly use Newtonian mechanics to describe a phenomena related with waves or light or sound. Okay, so for analyzing wave phenomena, okay, phenomena related to visible light or sound, like interference and diffraction and polarization, etc., there was an entirely different approach, the approach of electromagnetic theory. Okay, so the two treatments, the treatment of radiation, that is wave, and particle, that is matter, were totally exclusive. There was no way that you could use one to describe another. Okay, there was no point of what should I say, intersection of the two methods. However, when we realize that both matter and wave are dual in nature, and we are not in a position where we can exclusively say that matter is particle and radiation is wave. Okay, so we must also now look for a model which is so general that using that we can describe a wave phenomena as well as a particle phenomena. Okay, so that is our motto, that is our goal now, that to look out for a most general model. So this model is formulated by the probability interpretation. Okay, this was given by Einstein for particle nature of waves. When you have done photoelectric effect, or when you will be doing Bose-Einstein statistics, etc., you will see how this came in. And this same interpretation was given by Max Born for wave nature of particles. Okay. So here Einstein used a statistical treatment of radiation, which you will be doing in your next semester. I am presently doing the same thing, statistical treatment of radiation, with our semester 6 students. Exactly this thing I am teaching them. Okay. Where what did he do? He replaced exact number of photons. Instead of saying that there are 100 photons incident on the surface, or 0 photons incident on the surface, or 1000 photons crossing a given surface, instead of those exact numbers, he used the average number. Okay, so the number of photons is an average of several observations. So the number of photons lie between, say, n and n plus dn. The number of photons that are crossing a particular area lie between n and n plus dn. So that is how there was a switch over from exact numbers to probabilistic calculation or average numbers. Similarly, Max Born used a statistical model for matter, and we must here incorporate a function that will represent de Broglie wave associated with the particle. De Broglie has already given in his hypothesis that there is a wave associated with the particle. The presence of that wave, the association of that wave, has already been proven in several experiments involving electrons and neutrons and neutrinos and atoms of hydrogen or helium, etc. Now we must model, we must find a model, construct a model where the function that is being used using Born's statistical or probabilistic interpretation, that function must represent the de Broglie wave that is associated with the particle. Okay. So therefore, this is still what I had discussed in the last class. So therefore, now we have a major switch over in quantum mechanics. Now, when we had done problems related to Schrodinger equation, we had solved several problems, we had done alpha decay, we had done barrier penetration, etc. We had done the problems mechanically, and we had discussed the qualitative nature of the physical observation, but we have not really spoken about the statistical nature of the results, okay, or the statistical viewpoint from which Schrodinger equation came into being. Okay, but now we are at a juncture where we are studying things for which we have to discuss this switch over in quantum mechanics from deterministic to probabilistic. So we cannot, as I am telling you repeatedly, that we cannot, pointedly say that this is this. There is nothing deterministic now. We cannot say that the particle exists at so and so coordinate. We cannot say that the wavelength of the wave associated with the particle is exactly lambda. We cannot say that the frequency of vibration is exactly mu. So we switch over to intervals. We say that the number of particles lies between n and n plus dn. The wavelength lies between lambda and lambda plus d lambda. The frequency lies between mu and mu plus d. Okay, so we are switching over from deterministic to probabilistic. And the first step in this switching over is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. I want any one or two of you to please unmute and tell me what Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is, please. Because I'll tell you why I am asking you this. But someone or two or three of you, please unmute and tell me what Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is. Yes?
Ma'am, the
Just mathematical formula ta bol.
delta x into delta p greater than equals to h by 4 pi. That means the uncertainty in the in position and the uncertainty in momentum, the multiplication of those are greater than equals to h by 4 pi.
H cut by 2. Okay. Achha.
Sorry, h cut by 2, yes.
হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে, h by 4 pi means h cut by 2. আমি এইটা
Yes, ma'am.
এই জন্য আমি জিজ্ঞেস করলাম. I hope all of you have heard it and I hope all of you know the uncertainty principle to be this, because আমি এটা এই জন্য জিজ্ঞেস করলাম. আমার এই হঠাৎ করে হাইজেনবার্গ, এটা মানে নট রিলেটেড টু হোয়াট উই আর ডিসকাসিং, বাট while checking answer scripts, আমি বলবো না কোন সেমিস্টারের আনসার স্ক্রিপ্টস, তোমাদের না সেম 5 এর না কিসের, আমি একদম বলবো না কাদের আনসার স্ক্রিপ্ট, because that is confidential. কিন্তু মানে I was amazed to see যে কোনো একজনের খাতা থেকে কপি করার সময়, কারোর খাতা বা কোনো নোট থেকে কপি করার সময় কেউ একজন আনসার্টেনটি প্রিন্সিপাল লিখেছে ডেল্টা এক্স ডেল্টা পি এক্স গ্রেটার দেন ইকুয়াল টু 5/2, মানে এইচকে সে ভেবেছে 5 এবং সে কপি করেছে ভুল। সে এইচকে 5 দেখেছে, সে জানে না আনসার্টেনটি প্রিন্সিপাল এবং সে 5/2 কপি করেছে। সেটা হতে পারে 40 জন স্টুডেন্টের মধ্যে একজনের এই ভুলটা হতে পারে। I don't expect all 40 of you to know uncertainty principle by heart. But my surprise was, I was amazed to see that there were at least 15 answer scripts, 10 to 15 answer scripts যারা ওই 5/2 লিখেছে। কপি করতে করতে এইচটা যে 5 হয়ে গেছে, সেই 5টা অন্তত 10 থেকে 15টা আনসার স্ক্রিপ্টে ডেল্টা এক্স ডেল্টা পি এক্স গ্রেটার দ্যান ইকুয়াল টু 5/2। মানে আই ওয়াজ সো ডিসহার্টেন্ড। আমি কিন্তু আবারও বলছি যে এটা নট নেসেসারিলি ভেবে নিও না যে এটা তোমাদেরই সেমিস্টারে। আই এম নট সাপোজ টু ডিসক্লোজ কোন সেমিস্টারের খাতা আমি দেখেছি, কিন্তু যে সেমিস্টারেরই হোক তারা আমারই কলেজের ছেলে, তাদেরকে আমি কোয়ান্টাম মেকানিক্স পড়িয়েছি। সো I was really disgraced, it was disgraceful. I was amazed. মানে it's not a question of copying wrong. এইচ কারুর হাতের লেখায় 5 এর মতো দেখতে হতেই পারে। It's a question of so many people making the same mistake. কারুর একবারও মনে হলো না যে আনসার্টেনটি প্রিন্সিপালটা কি? What is the meaning of uncertainty principle? The fact that uncertainty principle is greater than equal to h/2, h এর ভ্যালু কত? কেউ একজন আনমিউট করে আমাকে একটু বলতে পারবে এইচ এর ভ্যালু কত, প্ল্যাঙ্কস কনস্ট্যান্টের ভ্যালু কত? রিয়া বলবে না, অন্য একজন কেউ। প্ল্যাঙ্কস কনস্ট্যান্টের ভ্যালু
6.6 × 10⁻34 জুল সেকেন্ড।
-34, 10 to the power -34. Yes, yes. That is the essence of uncertainty principle, the smallness of h. মানে তোমরা তো ফিজিক্স পড়ছো, ফিজিক্সটা না শুধু মুখস্থ করে, ডেরিভেশন মুখস্থ করে ঠিক ফিজিক্স পড়লে ফিজিক্স পড়ার আনন্দটাও পাবে না, আর কোনো মানেও হয় না। একবার আমি না এটা তোমাদের একটা জাস্ট একটু ভাবতে বলছি, আমি আজকে ক্লাসের শেষে কিংবা পরের দিন আমি জিজ্ঞেস করবো যে যদি আনসার্টেনটি প্রিন্সিপালের রাইট হ্যান্ড সাইডের ভ্যালুটা 5/2 হতো তাহলে কি হতো, ডেল্টা এক্স ডেল্টা পি এক্স অর ডেল্টা ই ডেল্টা টি। এইটা যদি আমি আগের সেমিস্টারে তোমাদের শেষের ইউনিটটা ছিল ওই কম্প্যাটিবিলিটি অফ নাম্বারস, তার সাথে আনসার্টেনটি প্রিন্সিপালের কি রিলেশন, এটা আমি ডিটেলে পড়িয়েছি, তোমাদেরও পড়িয়েছি, তোমাদের আগের সেমিস্টারকেও পড়িয়েছি। সো আই জাস্ট ওয়ান্ট ইউ টু থিঙ্ক যে delta x delta px or delta e delta t or whatever the two complementary variables are, তাদের প্রোডাক্টের আনসার্টেনটি গ্রেটার দেন ইকুয়াল টু যদি 5/2 হতো তাহলে কি হতে পারে? I just want you to think, okay? So I have totally digressed from what I am teaching, বাট আই কুডন্ট হেল্প, মানে আমার এটা বলতেই হতো তোমাদের, কারণ আমার বক্তব্যটা হচ্ছে যে এই ধরনের ভুল করো না, মানে ডোন্ট ব্লাইন্ডলি কপি অ্যান্ড ডোন্ট ব্লাইন্ডলি লার্ন বাই রোট। ফিজিক্স কিন্তু মুখস্থ করে শেখা যায় না। আমি জানি তোমরা সবাই ফিজিক্স কন্টিনিউ করবে না, কিন্তু এটা তো বেসিক, মানে ফিজিক্স অনার্স করছো আর হাইজেনবার্গস আনসার্টেনটি প্রিন্সিপাল, তুমি যদি এখন বলি যে শর্ডিঞ্জার ইকুয়েশন লেখো, তুমি যদি বলো না পারবো না, বা ডি ব্রয়েল ওয়েভ মানে কি, কিংবা এই যে এইচ এর ভ্যালু, প্ল্যাঙ্ক কনস্ট্যান্টের ভ্যালু কত, কিংবা একটা ফোটনের এনার্জি কি, এইগুলো যদি না বলতে পারো, মানে এগুলো তো একদম বেসিক, এর জন্য তো খুব শক্ত শক্ত অঙ্ক শেখার দরকার নেই। কিন্তু এইটা না জানাটা না, মানে তার মানে কি বলবো, মানে হয় আমি কিচ্ছু পড়াতে পারিনি, আর নয়তো তোমরা কিচ্ছু শোনোনি, অথবা দুটোই একসাথে। মানে আনসার্টেনটি প্রিন্সিপালটাকে ভুল টোকা, এবং সেইটা 15 জন লিখছে 5/2, মানে আড়াই। আনসার্টেনটি প্রিন্সিপাল হচ্ছে গ্রেটার দ্যান ইকুয়াল টু আড়াই, মানে সো আই জাস্ট ওয়ান্ট ইউ টু থিঙ্ক যে যারা ভুল করেছে করেছে, যারা করেনি করেনি, কিন্তু যদি আড়াই হতো তাহলে কি হতে পারে, আই ওয়ান্ট ইউ টু থিঙ্ক অ্যান্ড আই উইল আস্ক ফর দ্য আনসার, ওকে? এনিওয়ে, লেটস কন্টিনিউ। সো ফর সুইচিং ফ্রম ডিটারমিনিস্টিক টু প্রবাবিলিটি, হ্যাঁ বলো।
আমি বলছিলাম যদি ভ্যালুটা অতটা বেশি হয় তাহলে ক্লাসিক্যাল ফিজিক্স দিয়ে আমরা কিছু প্রেডিক্টই করতে পারতাম না।
এক্স্যাক্টলি। তাহলে মানে সমস্ত ফিজিক্স যা এতদিন অবধি পড়েছি তাহলে সব ভুল।
সবকিছু পুরোপুরি আনপ্রেডিক্টেবল হয়ে যেত,
সবই
কারণ
পুরোপুরি
আনসার্টেনটি অনেকটাই বেশি হয়ে
আনপ্রেডিক্টেবল।
যেত।
5 মানে কোথায় 10 টু দি পাওয়ার -34 আর কোথায় অর্ডার অফ 1 হোল নাম্বার। 5 মানে 1 হোল নাম্বারের অর্ডার অফ 10। মানে আমরা একটা, মানে এই যে গাড়ি চলছে, আমি বসে আছি, তুমি বসে ক্লাস করছো, কিছুই হতো না, কিছুই আমরা কোনো ক্যালকুলেশনই করতে পারতাম না। পৃথিবী নিজের কক্ষপথে আছে কিনা সেটাও বলতে পারতাম না। It is because of the fact that the value of Planck's constant is so small that classical physics is there. Classical physics আমরা মানে ক্লাসিক্যাল ফিজিক্স দিয়ে আমরা এত কিছু করতে পারছি, বিকজ ক্লাসিক্যাল ফিজিক্স ম্যাক্রোস্কোপিক ওয়ার্ল্ডকে পারফেক্টলি ডিসক্রাইব করে, নো প্রবলেম। কিন্তু সেটা কারণ হচ্ছে আনসার্টেনটিগুলো অনেক ছোট। ম্যাক্রোস্কোপিক ওয়ার্ল্ডে ওই রেঞ্জের আনসার্টেনটি ডাজন্ট ম্যাটার, ডাজন্ট মেক এনি ডিফারেন্স। কিন্তু ওই 5 রেঞ্জের আনসার্টেনটি হলে তাহলে তো মানে সমস্তটাই আনপ্রেডিক্টেবল হয়ে যেত। সো আমার জাস্ট যেটা রিকোয়েস্ট সবাইকে, যে যখন পড়ছো, যখন একটু বুঝে পড়ো, না বুঝতে পারলে জিজ্ঞেস করো, আস্ক, but don't be so, don't copy so blindly that you totally change the meaning of something. Okay, anyway. Okay, so what does Heisenberg's uncertainty principle say? It says that simultaneous measurement of position and momentum cannot give results more accurate than given by this uncertainty principle, right? This is the statement of uncertainty principle. And we also know that the wave function representing a free particle is such that if you consider the particle of mass m and momentum px, and it is moving freely non-relativistically in the x direction, then we know that it has a definite momentum. Okay, the moment you say that it is moving with a momentum px, it also simultaneously says that the uncertainty in momentum is zero, that is delta px is zero, which means that according to HUP, the uncertainty in position becomes infinite. Okay, if uncertainty in momentum is zero, then from HUP quickly you can say that the uncertainty in position is infinite. Okay, now de Broglie hypothesis ki bolche? De Broglie hypothesis says that the wavelength of the wave associated with the moving particle is this, lambda equal to h by px. And from Planck's hypothesis, we know that the energy is equal to h nu, energy of each photon. So nu, the frequency, is E by h. Okay, so if you introduce the parameters h cut equal to h by 2 pi and k equal to 2 pi by lambda, then we can see that the momentum, which is equal to h by lambda, can be written as h cut k, and the energy, which is h nu, can be written as h cut omega, right? So momentum is h cut k and energy is h cut omega. Now what have we done? What have we done by introducing these two new forms of energy and momentum? We have been able, now energy and momentum are exclusively particle parameters. When we have a body which is moving, a particle, material particle which is moving, it has a momentum and energy. Okay, whereas k, that is wave number 2 pi by lambda, and omega, that is frequency, are exclusively wave parameters. We talk about wavelength of a wave, we talk about frequency of a wave. So basically we have written down particle parameters in terms of wave parameters by writing p equal to h cut k and e equal to h cut omega. Okay, right? So expressions of p and e in terms of lambda and omega gives the particle parameters in terms of wave parameters. Now momentum being specified and position being possible anywhere along the x-axis, since we saw that uncertainty in position is infinity, which means, what does uncertainty in position is infinite? What is the meaning of that? That it can be anywhere, and since we are considering one-dimensional motion, so it can be anywhere on the x-axis from minus infinity to plus infinity. There is no clue about where its position is at a particular instant of time. Its uncertainty is infinite, so it can be anywhere between minus infinity and plus infinity. Therefore, such a particle can be represented by a plane progressive wave function. We know a plane progressive wave function also extends from minus infinity to plus infinity. There is no restriction on its space parameter. So such a particle which is moving non-relativistically, freely, not under the influence of any potential, in the x direction with a certain momentum, then we can see that we can represent that particle by a plane progressive wave function. What is this wave function? A to the power minus I omega t minus kx. Okay. You have used this wave function several times while solving Schrodinger equation. Okay, when we had done problems on Schrodinger equation, etc., free particle, etc., problems, we had used this. So all of you are familiar with this wave function. This is the wave function of a purely monochromatic wave, plane progressive wave, which has extent from minus infinity to plus infinity. Now we know omega and k in terms of px and e, so we write psi in terms of px and e. So psi is equal to a e to the power I by h cut pxx minus et. So we have written down the wave function associated with a free particle in terms of its particle parameters, that is in terms of its momentum and energy. All right. So this now is a complex function. The wave function that is representing the free particle is, of course, you can see, is a complex function. So interpretation of how such a complex function is representing something real. The particle is very much a real thing. It's not an imaginary thing. When you talk about a particle which is moving with a certain momentum in a certain direction, then it's not imaginary. It's something real. So how such a complex function may be able to represent a real physical particle, that interpretation comes from the probabilistic point of view of quantum mechanics. And this also we had discussed while discussing Born interpretation in our previous semester classes, right? So, and we know that if you talk about three-dimensional motion, then you just replace x by r, and you see psi rt is a to the power I by h cut p dot r minus at. So this is wave function for any general direction r. Now, therefore, the next question that we ask is, what are these matter waves like? Can we really see them? We saw that de Broglie's hypothesis said there is a wave associated with a moving particle. We saw that for a free particle, we can actually associate a wave which is a plane progressive wave. We will see further what the wave will be like if it is not a free particle. Okay. But the question that comes to our mind is that can we really see them? Now the entire of electromagnetic radiation, you know that there is only a small part that we can see, the visible light. Okay. But there are phenomena involving these waves, the electromagnetic waves, that prove their presence. What about matter waves? So that is our next question. Can we really see them? Okay. So for that, we recall again the de Broglie relation, lambda equal to h by p. Now, suppose you consider the motion of a tennis ball. Okay. A tennis ball which is of mass say 1 kg. Usually a tennis ball will not be of mass 1 kg. Then suppose any ball, any object which is of a mass 1 kg. Pretty heavy. And velocity 10 meter per second. So not so fast, but pretty heavy. And we are considering its motion. So if you calculate the wavelength of the wave associated with such a ball, the de Broglie wave associated with such a ball, what will you see? The value of lambda is like this. I have done the calculation. It is of the order of about 10 to the power minus 25 angstroms. Visible light is between 4000 and 7000 angstrom. Okay. Smallest electromagnetic waves are of the order of, I think, a few thousand angstroms. So the point is that the wavelength of the wave associated with the moving particle as calculated according to de Broglie hypothesis is extremely small. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. only the numerical value we can see is extremely small. Clear? Now next let us consider the motion of an electron of kinetic energy about 100 electron volt, not very highly energetic, not of the order of mega electron volts, 100 electron volts. Okay. Now let us calculate the wavelength of the wave associated with this particle, the electron. Okay. So lambda equal to h by p, it has kinetic energy only, therefore momentum will be root over 2me or 2mk, and if you put the values, then this is what you get, 1.2 angstrom. So the heavy tennis ball has a wave whose wavelength is of the order of 10 to the power minus 25 angstrom, and the electron, moving electron, has associated with it a wave which has a wavelength of the order of a few angstroms. Clear? So these are the two values that we have to consider. Obviously, de Broglie wavelength for macroscopic bodies are too small for observation. Okay? If you have a macroscopic object and you want to see its de Broglie wave, then it is not possible because the wavelength is too small. It is beyond the capability of our eyes or any other instrument to observe them. And as I told you several times in our previous topics also, that if something is not observable, if you cannot see something, it doesn't mean it is not existing. Okay? When you see something, it means it is probing one of your senses. Remember when I was teaching interference, double slit interference, I told you that if there are two separate sources, will interference fringes be formed? And after a few things that we discussed, we concluded that of course interference fringes will be formed, but we cannot see them. Why? Because the two separate sources are not coherent. Hence, the interference fringes, the pattern, the intensity pattern will change so rapidly, the change in the interference pattern will be so rapid that our optic nerves will not be able to register that. We are not capable enough to register such fast change. That doesn't mean that the fringes are not being formed. They are formed. If we could register so fast changes, we would be able to see them, but we cannot. And hence, Thomas Young had to devise the double slit experiment where he produced two virtually coherent sources. Remember, from a single source, he created two virtually coherent sources and he could observe the fringes. Similarly here, we cannot say that a wave is not associated with a macroscopic object. Okay, when a fast bowler throws a ball, I'm totally detached with cricket right now, so I won't be able to tell you who the fastest bowler is. You might be able to say. I would say probably who used to be Shoaib Akhtar, maybe. Shoaib Akhtar used to be a very fast. He used to bowl. His speed was, I think, 140, 150 kmph, the speed of his ball. Right? Am I right or wrong? I'm so detached from cricket right now. But anyway, when a fast bowler throws a ball, and if someone says that, what are you saying, de Broglie wavelength? He is throwing the ball at such a speed, not even so large a particle. There is no wave associated. Okay? Or when suppose Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world, athlete, when he is running, I don't know what his speed is. When he is running, someone might say, Where is your de Broglie wave? He is running so fast, there is no wave, I can't see any wave. Then you as a physicist will say, of course there is a wave, but I will calculate and show you what the wavelength is. Our eyes cannot see such a wavelength, such a wavelength of which has the value of which is so small. It is of the order of 10 to the power minus 10 or 20 angstroms. We cannot see it. No device can register it. That's why we cannot see it. But the wave is very much there according to de Broglie hypothesis. Understood? So de Broglie wavelength for macroscopic body is too small for observation. De Broglie wavelength for a microscopic body is comparatively large, 1.2 angstrom, and we know that. How can anyone tell me how can we, is there any device that you can think of using which we can see wavelengths of this value? Anyone? That wavelength of this value can may be observable? Yes? কারোর মনে পড়ছে কিছু? বলো বলো।
ইন্টারফেরোমিটার।
না 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 ইন্টারফেরোমিটার না, আমি না এই যে এই আচ্ছা ধরো যখন তোমরা ডিফ্র্যাকশন করেছিলে, when you did diffraction or Young's double slit, remember when can we see the phenomena? When the slit is of the order of the wavelength, when the value of the slit width is close to the value of the wavelength. So here too you must in order to see waves of this wavelength 1.2 angstrom, the slits wave mane what phenomena do you expect? Wave nature observe korbe jokhon tumi interference dekhte pabe ba diffraction dekhte pabe, then you can say that yes, wave phenomena is being they are undergoing wave phenomena. Tar mane you need to have slits which is of the order of this 1.2 angstrom. So interatomic distance in crystals, okay, interatomic distance in crystals is of the order of a few angstroms. Okay, so crystals will serve as a device which might be able to diffract such waves. Understood? Observable. So for microscopic or submicroscopic particles such as electrons, the interatomic spaces may serve as slits to detect the diffraction of the waves associated with such particles. Clear now? Therefore, we will once again discuss Davison-Germer experiment. I had mentioned Davison-Germer experiment before. Now we'll discuss it in a little more detail. So this is the apparatus or the schematic layout of Davison-Germer experiment. This is a crystal. This is an electron gun, okay, from which I have taken this picture from the internet. So this is an electron gun and electron beam is coming out from this electron gun and it is incident on the crystal. Okay, so in the crystal the atoms are basically placed with an interatomic distance which is close to the value of the de Broglie wavelength that may be associated with a moving electron. Okay, so these electrons will be scattered by the atoms. Now we have to see the scattered beam using a detector. Now it was seen that the polar diagram, this is the polar diagram showing the intensity variation as function of phi for different accelerating potential. What is phi? Phi is the angle between the incident beam and the scattered beam. So if you change the position of the detector, you can see the arrow, the direction of movement of my arrow, of my cursor. So if you change the position of the detector, the value of phi will change. Okay, and accordingly you measure the variation, the intensity as a variation of, as a function of phi. So this is what is observed at different voltages. This is the curve that is seen, and see that at a particular value of the potential 54 accelerating potential is the potential difference between the electron gun and this. So this accelerating potential will basically determine the kinetic energy of the incident electrons. Okay, and you know that the kinetic energy will determine the wavelength of the electron using de Broglie hypothesis. Okay, so you can see that for a particular value of the accelerating potential, it has a peak. The polar diagram, it has a peak. Other values also has a peak. They also have a peak, but the value of the peak is highest for this particular voltage. Okay, so observation of such a peak can only be attributed to constructive interference of waves scattered by periodically placed atoms in the crystal, and this is exactly similar to what happens in Bragg's reflections. When you will be doing X-rays, I don't know if you've already done X-rays, you will see that you will be doing Bragg's reflections, and you will see that this is exactly what happens there with X-rays, which are electromagnetic waves. X-rays are prescribed electromagnetic waves, but the same observation is here being done with electrons, which are particles. Okay, so using Bragg's law, we can write 2d sine phi equal to n lambda, where phi is 90 minus theta by 2. This is theta, and this gives lambda to be of the order of 1.65 angstrom. Okay, and using de Broglie's formula for this value of the accelerating potential, we get again lambda equal to 1.65. So de Broglie's formula and Bragg's formula, they give us the same value of the lambda for the wave associated with the moving electron. So this confirms the existence of matter waves. This experiment was the first one that confirmed absolutely the existence of matter waves. I told you this was done in 1927, and later on several other experiments were done which further confirmed the existence of matter waves. Okay. I think that is a logical place to end today's class, because after this we will go into the mathematical characteristics of matter waves, and which we will do in the next class, and end this chapter in our next class. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you a certain yes, this is a very interesting point that all of you have perhaps read, but I'm sure all of you don't remember that. Do all of you know that J.J. Thomson was the person who discovered electron? Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. In 1897, J.J. Thomson discovered electron, and that was the first time that it was finally discovered that atoms can further be broken down into particles. Not broken down, but there are particles that are smaller in size than the atom, and that atom is not the absolute building block. They are building blocks of matter as a whole, but they are further made up of smaller particles. So 1897, J.J. Thomson made this discovery. He characterized the particle with a definite charge to mass ratio, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1906. Okay. Now, why I am telling you this? Because 20 years later, 1906, J.J. Thomson was given the Nobel Prize for discovering electron as a particle. 20 years later, in fact, 30 years later, in 1937, G.P. Thomson, who was the son of J.J. Thomson, he got the Nobel Prize along with Davison and Germer. Okay. They got the Nobel Prize for establishing the wave nature of electron. So father and son both got Nobel Prize. Father for discovering the particle electron and son for establishing the wave nature of electron. So this is something very, intriguing. In Iceberg's book, he writes, one may feel inclined to say that Thomson, the father, was awarded the Nobel Prize for having shown that electron is a particle, and Thomson, the son, for having shown that the electron is a wave. But as we know that not only electrons but all material objects, charged or uncharged, they show wave-like characteristics, and their motion under conditions, under the conditions of physical optics. So if we can devise apparatus where the slits are of the order of the wavelength of the de Broglie wave associated with the moving particle, then we can always observe the wave-like character. So in my previous slide here, if we can devise an apparatus where the slit width is of the order of this, then you can see the wave associated with this massive ball moving with a certain velocity. You will be able to see interference, diffraction, etc. because of this, because of the movement of this ball and the wave associated with it. All right. So once again, it's the framing of your answer is very important. If you are asked, that you are given, or just like as I was telling you, that Usain Bolt runs at 150 kilometers per hour. Is there a wave associated with it? Why can't we see it? So your answer, if you say that no, there is no associated wave with it, then your answer is wrong. Every material particle which is moving has a wave associated with it, with wavelength given by de Broglie's formula. So your answer should be yes, it has a wave. He has a wave associated with it. A massive object which is moving always has a wave associated with it. But the wavelength is of the order of this, and we don't have any device that can possibly observe waves of such small wavelengths, which is why we cannot observe the waves. We cannot see the waves. We cannot see. We cannot design experiments that can show the existence of these waves, but the waves are very much there. However, if we take microscopic particles like electrons or protons or neutrinos, etc., then the wave associated with these moving particles has a wavelength of the order of a few angstroms, and we are capable of designing experiments where the slit width is of the same order, and we can see the wave phenomena with the waves associated with these particles. Is it clear? Is this clear, the concept of matter wave, of whether a wave is associated always or not, and under what circumstances it can be seen or not seen? I hope it is clear now. Okay. So yes. So after this we will go over to the mathematical properties and the mathematical representation. So in our next class we will.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ম্যাম মাইকেলসন মডেল এক্সপেরিমেন্ট লরেন্স ট্রান্সফরমেশন ওগুলো কি আপনি পড়াবেন?
না, ওটা তো রিলেটিভিটি।
ওকে।
রিলেটিভিটি তো
হ্যাঁ
আমি
ম্যাম, কিন্তু ওটা তো কেউ সেখানে স্টার্ট করেনি, তো কে পড়াবেন তাই জন্য।